Hi everyone, my name is Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek. We're here in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, and I'm really happy that you've joined me here today because once again, I have something fun to share with you. You know, when you're making a watercolor painting and then it comes to the background, and sometimes it's good to have that stark white in the background, but sometimes you don't want that. Well, I'm going to show you how to incorporate a background without even really painting a background. And for our subject matter, we're going to use a curated palette rather, that isn't really intended for this purpose. So you'll see what I mean. Are you ready? Let's go see how it works. I want to share with you what I purchased from an Etsy shop. My friend Raquel does a shop on Etsy, and the name of her shop is Aquarellie Art. I will link to everything in the description. I'll show you in the description. You can just link right to it. She sent me some beautiful things. These I purchased from her. They are some M-Gram paints. Now, I have wanted to use this for a long time. This has been one of my sets that's just kind of been one of my dream sets to have because I live in the desert Southwest, and I would really like to be able to use these paints. Now, geographical people out there, let me tell you, technically where I'm located on the globe is High Plains Desert, but on the western part of our state, this reigns supreme, and we have an awful lot of Red Rocks Amphitheater, for those of you that have heard of that, in our immediate region. And wait until I take you to the Paint Mines Interpretational Park. Oh my goodness, these colors are going to be the ones we're going to use. So I have a huge use, for this palette, and it has a quinacridone rust, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, mineral violet, and turquoise. Now, truth be told, I do have some of these other M-Gram colors because I couldn't wait to get them. But here's why I'm so excited that I have this set from Raquel Clark. So many companies make curated palettes. M-Gram does quite a few. I mean, just to name a few, in addition to this Desert Southwest set, they have the Jewel Tone set. They've got a Cobalt set. They have the Summer set. And they've also got, I think, the colors of the East Coast and the Pacific Northwest. Not sure on those, but they have a lot. All of these these curated palettes that we find when we look somewhere. So these colors speak to me because they are from the area where I live. If you live in an area more green, then maybe a different set would speak to you. At any rate, what I love that Raquel did with these is that on this little card here, she's got everything you'd ever want to know about these paints. And before I go any further, I just want to share with you, there will be a coupon that you can use when you visit her shop. If you use the coupon ANN15, and I'll put that right up here in the text so that you can see. I'll put it in the description too, so you can just copy and paste it. You will get 15% off your purchase. It's so wonderful, and Raquel is so easy to work with. And I love supporting small businesses, so shout out to Etsy and all of the makers there. At any rate, here we have the light fastness, and you can see every single one of these is 5 stars. Here is the transparency and staining ratings, and then also, is it a granulator or not? And the pigment information. And then on the back, here's the key to everything. So everything you would need to know about these paints is right here on this handy little card. And then we have some information about M-Gram paints. Now, for those of you who didn't know about M-Gram, I will read from this for you in this next clip here because the tip that she gives in here is really very true. So let's cut away now and I will read from that. I also want to make it really clear that I paid for these with my own money. I'm not sponsored by Etsy or Aquarellie Art. This is just a relationship that we started up through a conversation. At any rate, for the care instructions that she includes, and I'm so glad she suggested this, I had a little bit of trouble getting the foil off of the paints when they first arrived because of the nature of that honey consistency. The foil did stick to them a little bit. But she suggested putting them in the freezer for 24 hours before you open them, and I did. And here I am opening them, and they're working just fine. She also says, depending upon the pigment, some of the paints may not be immediately dry after use. Please keep this in mind before traveling and storing. Like I mentioned, you want to make sure, or that I will mention, you want to make sure and let your palette dry before it closes, before you close it. For long-term storage, I recommend placing the tin flat and in an upright position. If you live in a high humidity environment, please take care to remove excess water and or dry naturally from the paint beforehand. This extra precaution will prevent possible spoil of your beautiful new paints. And then she says, I, like many other artists, love these paints, and I'm sure you will too. And I agree, Raquel. M. Graham are my favorites by far. And of course, if you have any questions, you can please contact Raquel after your purchase, and she will indeed be happy to help. Using honey recalls the practice from early artists who drew their inspiration from the environment, but it also means no artificial humectants and preservatives are used. Now, I'm going to just pause here for a moment, because if you are vegan and you are against the use of an animal byproduct, I think that honey might be something that you will have to reconcile with. I'm not a vegan, I don't lead a vegan lifestyle, but I know that that's important to some people, which is why I want to point this out. When honey is activated, it flows freely and gives you a velvet smooth application for fluid washes. That is exactly why I love M. Graham paints for me here in Colorado, because they're honey based. M. Graham's pigments though are just really amazing. The honey's notoriously sticky property promotes re-wetting your paint with ease. Even after months of disuse, the honey resists your paint from hardening on your palette, saving your brushes. I suspect that there's also something to the antibacterial qualities of honey. Not sure, but the big tip I can give you is when you close your palette, make sure your paints are completely dry before you close it up. Okay, moving on. This is so adorable. Look at this. It's like a little Altoids tin. No, actually, look at that. It's the exact same size. You can purchase these from Aquarellie Art, and the greatest thing about this is if you are coveting a set like this, you know, you can end up paying quite a bit for that. And this is why I think it's so economical, because purchasing these sample sets lets you decide if you want to invest in a full tube later. So this is really the way to go. Get yourself on Etsy, shop from Raquel, use my coupon, use that AN15 coupon, and dive in. So there's my support, and I endorse that genuinely. I really believe that that's the way to go. And Raquel was kind enough to help us out with that. I think I'm just going to swatch these on here. I just got up to get something and I spilled coffee on my swatch card, so I'm not going to use it. Let me just grab a pencil here. All right, so first things first, the quinacridone rust. Quinacridones are really neat colors to have. They're very vibrant, very intense, and they just create kind of a gem-like luminescence in your painting. I really love using the quinacridones. I'm glad there's extra space in this tin, because honestly, I could take these 5 with me, add like a rose madder or a quinacridone magenta and also an ultramarine blue, and I would be all set. I'd have all the paints I need to paint everything I ever like to paint. There is so much versatility to this set. You've got all of those warm tones, and just at first sight, they look quite similar, but really they're very diverse. And then finally the turquoise, which is just gorgeous. Almost like a phthalo, but it's much clearer. Let me just drop some water in each of these so that we can see some effects of some forced cauliflower blooms. And then you can kind of get some idea of what these paints can do. Now, the paper that I'm doing this swatch on is 100% cotton, and it's got a decent texture. So I'm just going to set that aside. So the first thing I want to do is draw our picture. Now, this was taken in the Botanic Garden up in Fort Collins, Colorado. I had a wonderful opportunity to go there with some of my friends and paint. But this one that we're going to use today was taken by my friend Risa, and she was sitting very close to this lilac bush that was just getting ready to bloom, and I thought it was just the most beautiful depiction of the leaves. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to start with the branch. I do have a link to this photo in the description as the pop-up text indicated, and you're welcome to print that photo off, trace it, draw a grid on your photo paper copy, your copy paper copy rather, and translate the grid onto your paper, or you can tape it to a window, put your watercolor paper over that, and then trace the important information that you would like to have in your drawing, or you can certainly try and draw it yourself. I wanted this to be open and airy, so you will notice I left out a lot of information. What we're trying to do is create a background without actually having to put in a background. And we're going to use a Desert Southwest set on something that is really not very deserty or Southwest. I'm going to leave these pencil lines darker so that you can see them. Normally we'd erase them and make them faint, more faint because of the technique that we're going to use today, but I want to go ahead and leave them on for you. So I am going to cover this with water. It's not going to be anything precise. My water is tinted just a little bit from the swatching, but that's okay. It's not tinted enough that it's going to show up. What I do want to do is go beyond my drawing. That's what's important here. Get it a nice even amount of moisture and make sure you go beyond your drawing. I'm going to go in here with my number 14. And let's mix. I'm going to use the yellow ochre and the turquoise. And we're going to mix a very nice green. Very deep and very rich. And what I'm going to do is just place it here on these leaves. You don't have to be accurate. Right now I'm using a number 14 round. What you do want to do though is go beyond where your leaves are. And if you want to, you can definitely splatter in at this point. Use the Indian yellow this time because I want it to be a little bit of a lighter green. Warmer, I should say. And don't forget to add some of this in between the areas of where you're painting, because what this is going to be is the leaves that you can't see, the leaves that are behind. So all of this can be very faint, very light. Actually, let's just start with the quinacridone rust and just very lightly, sorta, kinda, suggest where the branches are. There we go. Now because I'm trying to stick to this palette, I'm going to make this lilac more purple than it appears. And we can definitely add some of that. And if your sprays get a little bit out of hand like this one did, I'm just going to pick that up a touch. And let's go back in and add some of that green that we had. I'll just go in with some yellow ochre here. And then we'll drop some turquoise in. Now I'm just kind of checking for puddles anywhere because I don't want anything to dry looking too odd or with any hard edges. You just take your brush, get it wet, blot it off. So now you have what's called a thirsty brush. And you just very gently pass that across the puddle and then you can blot it off. And this just lets you pick up the excess of what's there so that you won't end up with any of those hard edges that you don't want. Because what's going to happen here is we're going to get a back run. So let me clean these up and then we'll let it dry. Well, that's had plenty of time to dry and you can see all of those puddles are gone. We just have a nice soft variance of green and a little suggestion of a purple bloom there. Palette. So the lilac in the photo is a little more pink. If you wanted to do that, I would use a quinacridone magenta or a quinacridone rose. But we're going to go ahead and just try and stay in this Desert Southwest palette. So what I want to do first is go into that Indian yellow. And then we're going to mix some of this turquoise, just a tiny bit, because a little goes a long way with this turquoise. In reality, this painting took me over 2 hours to do, but I promise I won't keep you here that long. I'm just mixing that turquoise with the yellows in this set to create a warm green and a cool green. The Indian yellow plus the turquoise will give you a beautiful warm kind of a spring green, and then that yellow ochre just brings it down into such a wonderful moody cool level. What I'm doing here is I'm not working in areas that are adjacent to one another directly. I'm leaving some space. So you see I got the inside of that leaf done and then I moved on to the inside of another leaf. You don't want to work right next to another leaf that's already wet because you can just increase your chances of creating some some colors charging into one another. Now, if you want to do that, please go ahead, but you don't necessarily have to paint that way. So I am leaving that space. With that central leaf there, what I decided to do was to just drop in some turquoise while it was wet so that I could get some of that deep shadow in there. And I will do that alternatively with many of the leaves. I will paint some green and then drop in some of the yellows to bring in some light. The first wash here, we're just going in and placing the color down, and then I'm coming back in with a wet brush and spreading the pigment around like you can see right here, where I had those pigments merged together, and you can see that on this leaf too. You just deposit the pigment and then come back in with a wet brush and spread it around to wherever you want it to go. I really like this method. I like the way that it lets things come out so crisp and clear, but I also really like how it lets the paints have their playground. That's one of the things I love the most about watercolor, is letting the paints do things for me that I probably could not achieve with a brush. And with this set, with the Desert Southwest set, you've got a lot of natural granulators. You have the yellow ochre and the mineral violet. Both of those two are naturally granulating, and they just really work together to make some beautiful, beautiful pigments. The turquoise mixed with that yellow ochre makes such a lovely green, and then when that granulation comes in, it truly creates a lot of dimension that you just couldn't replicate with a brush alone. I'm having fun varying the shades of yellow and working with different shades of green, adding different ratios of the Indian yellow in with that turquoise just to really create these greens in kind of a custom format. I'm not necessarily following the exact hue of the greens in the photo. I am really making this my own with a limited palette. And that is something else that you can really do with a limited palette or one of these curated palettes, is to really take something, take a picture that you've taken, or if you're en plein air, whatever you're doing, use the colors that you've got in front of you and try and challenge yourself to create your version of what it is you're seeing using that limited palette. It really does expand your toolbox as an artist, and it lets you see color differently, and it lets you capture different moods of color in ways that maybe I normally wouldn't have done if I had just mixed an ultramarine with a lemon yellow, which is pretty much a go-to green. If I had done that, maybe I wouldn't have come up with this same look on the painting. And I believe I've gone around the painting twice at this point, and so I've got a couple of glazes on there, and I'm just taking a look now at the mix between the mineral violet and that turquoise, because what I'm going to do is to take advantage of the ability of that mineral violet, to go ahead and granulate, and I'm going to mix it with the turquoise on the paper. I'm not being real accurate or precise with this. I am drawing what I feel like, really drawing with my paintbrush, what I feel would be a beautiful representation of a lilac bloom that is just starting to bloom. I'm trying to get the mineral violets to represent the areas that are closer to us or a little bit lighter, and then I'll go in with that turquoise and drop in some shadowy colors. And that will help me to achieve some dimension, some form that I normally couldn't get if I were just using one color and going in, let's say, wet on dry or something like that. There's nothing at all wrong with going in wet on dry to create dimension and shadow and light. It's a technique well used in watercolor. But what I wanted to achieve here today was using some of that blue to create some shadows behind those lilac blooms. They're chiefly mineral violet. Now I'm finishing this up here with the stem. I'm going in with that quinacridone rust, and now I'm going to mix some of that turquoise in there just to achieve a really dark, dark green. With that really deep green, I'll be able to achieve some more depth and dimension to the stem itself. And now I'm going to go in with that mineral violet. I realize I neglected one of the blossoms down here. And I'm going in with the mineral violet and some of that turquoise and just finishing up that flower. And then we're just going to do some final splatters to just give this a real loose look. Don't shy away from those splatters. They're a lot of fun, and they just really add an extra bit of zest or energy to your painting. Now, some of these hard edges are kind of bothering me, so let me show you the technique I'm going to use to get rid of those or soften them just a little. For this technique, what you want to be sure and do is use clean water and a very clean rag. What you're going to do is get the little corner of your rag wet, and then just very gently scrub away those hard lines so that they just become soft and a little easier on the eye. And now that the painting is complete, I'm just going to give it a signature. I don't often sign my paintings with my paintbrush, but today it felt like it was the right thing to do because I didn't use any ink at all in this. The colors are nice and soft. I didn't want to introduce anything new. So I'm going to go ahead and sign this with some of the paint that I've got mixed. I'm going to use that dark hunter green. Now I'm going to try and slowly pan this for you so that you can see what we came up with here. I think that you will discover that when you're working with a minimal palette, don't shy away from the name. Just because it says Desert Southwest, you certainly don't have to use Desert Southwest subject matter. Here I've painted a lilac and I've used those colors that are so rich and earthy in that Southwest set. And I think we came up with a winner, don't you? I hope you guys get a chance to try Aquarellie Art on Etsy and use my 15% off coupon. And moreover, have a lot of fun painting this lilac from the garden at Spring Creek in Fort Collins. Take care, you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye now.